Hi, I'm Hans Glimt. You're watching Farmann TV, and today is November 18th, 2009. We are joined here in the Farmann TV studio, Tech Talk, today with Mr. Salve Joshua Nilsen, who is the leader of the Oslo Perl Mongers, the network for Perl programmers here in Oslo, Norway. And Salve Nilsen, why do you program in Perl?
Yes, it's a good question. It's the first language I really bothered learning well. It's basically, but that's also like asking a Norwegian, why do you speak Norwegian? Well, why is Norwegian your language? It's circumstances which decide something like that. But with time, personally, I can say that I've learned to like it a lot. It has lots of interesting features. It has a huge amount of software available freely at the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network, the library of all kinds of modules for that programming language. And in general, it's a very free and fun language to program in with almost no restrictions at all. It lets me express myself and solve my problems easily and with a fun way.
If we compare Perl to other programming languages, I mean, PHP is very popular these days. What is the advantage of Perl?
Well, CPAN is the first answer there, I think. Perl community by itself is also something remarkable. It's all over the world with hundreds of Perl Monger organizations and daily grassroots, no, not daily, regular grassroots conferences all over the place. In Norway, we've had several Nordic Perl workshops where I've been organizing those. There's one in just a short time next weekend, I think, in London. And there's another one in Riga, actually. So it's all over the place, everywhere. The Russians are good at it. The Americans are good at it. It's an international community with people knowing each other, and it's fun.
All right, sounds good. But I guess that's the truth with a lot of programming languages, PHP, Ruby on Rails, the C++, everything. So what I'd like to know is, do you consider Perl, or is Perl a last generation, fully updated programming language, or is it slightly older generation, last generation?
Previous, yeah. Well, it's like any natural language. It's under constant development. Right now, the current stable version is Perl version 5.10, and that's to come to that point. Perl has evolved for more than 20 years. It's almost 25 years, actually. Having said that, there's a next version coming, Perl version 6, which has been in the making in the making for 8-9 years now. And that language has ambitions of being better than anything else out there. Basically, the idea is to take out everything that's not good with language as we know it today, which we aren't happy with, and stealing from everywhere all the good stuff. And as far as I have seen the last couple of years, the Perl 6 guys are succeeding really nicely with that. It's an extremely good language to learn. It's not stable in the manner that I would have run a nuclear power plant with it, but but it's definitely worth looking into today. And next year, second quarter, there will be a stable release of that language, which should be good enough for normal people. That means not the most intensely enthusiastic Perl programmers to go out and try.
Okay, I think we get it. Is it to say that, I know you mentioned that the new 6 is not backwards compatible with older Perl versions. So will you say that with version 6 there's a make it or break it session for Perl coming up, or?
Perhaps in some ways it is. It's a Perl. It's a language which is familiar, but not backwards compatible, as you say. But the reason for that is in order to get rid of the craft, the bad stuff, we have to do it. Having said that, they have ambitions of making it possible to migrate from Perl 5 to Perl 6 with, I think they were aiming for like 98% of 99% of all code should be easily transferable. And then the last few hundred lines, you have to manually check that you're doing it right. So when that time comes, that when the Perl 6 should be able to be quite mature enough and easy enough for a Perl 5 projects to migrate to that language.
Okay, sounds good. Well, if we look at someone who's looking at a new development project and from a project manager's perspective, and looking at different programming languages and comparing them to each other, what would be the criteria that would be present for someone to choose Perl over PHP or any other language?
Well, first of all, in so many situations, it depends on what kind of people you have. And if your programmers are PHP programmers or Python, then it's perhaps easier to just go with the flow and try and make it what you can out of it. Having said that, Perl does have CPAN and 18,000 plus modules and a huge community which lets you get all those nice things for free. It's a language with less restrictions and still huge amounts of features, so you can do stuff very quickly, as in with many of the other high-level languages. So it's an even match. I would say Perl matches up very well against the competitions. It's better in some ways, depending on your business and what area you need to have your problem solved. Perl might do well, very well, or perhaps not as good. But in the final hour, it's actually the people that counts. It is.
Okay, of course. So you go with the competence that's available. But when it comes to, if we use an expression like total cost of ownership, it's a kind of a Microsoft approach to the problem. Would you say that, there's a trade-off between the hours you spend making something and the flexibility and the access you have to the core functionality? Would you say that, rather simplistic, straightforward stuff, you can go with PHP, but if you need to have total control over the application and need to really be able to tune things more, then you rather go with Perl? Is that a simplistic way to put it?
Yes and no. One thing I've experienced is that it depends on your level of ambition. If you are solving a problem which will be needing attention for years to come, this is not a one-off problem that will be done in 3 weeks or whatever it takes, then what language you choose doesn't matter at all. If it's a 10-year project or 5 years, something, a societal problem which needs solved with the code in some way, then you have to consider maintainability and what kind of people you have and available. And in that direction, in that case, the choice of language becomes very important. Perl does do well there, but it's it's a very free language. It lets you express yourself easily in many ways, which also has a back side of the coin, meaning your personal ways of doing things will perhaps not be the same way other people will do it, which makes things like coding style and conventions on how you do stuff more important. And some other languages, like especially Python, tries to pose rules in that regard on the programmer, which helps the long term a little bit, but for some short-term annoyances. So Perl does well there, but it requires a certain amount of discipline from the programmer.
All right, very good. Well, we've appreciated the opportunity to talk to Salve Joshua Nilsen, who is the leader of the Oslo Perl Mongers group. And this has been a talk by Farmann Tech Talk. We'll be back with more.